When most people picture Rome's downfall, they see rough tribes battering walls, legions breaking rank, or a ruler slumped over a poisoned goblet under cold marble. But empires rarely implode from the outside alone. They decay from within, and the acid that eats them almost always runs through their money. Rome was not undone only by invasions or palace intrigue. It was undone because its currency failed. The lessons of that failure still matter to every modern state that imagines it can manipulate money without consequence. Let's set the stage. For centuries, Rome's economic spine was the silver denarius. First struck around 201 BCE, it was nearly pure silver, entrusted from Britain's frontiers to the deserts of Syria. Soldiers received it, merchants required it, savers stored it. The denarius was not merely coin, it was confidence hammered into metal. By the way, if you love money, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Now let's continue. The empire's force and the coin's value rose together. Faith in Rome meant faith in its money, but ruling an empire is ruinously expensive. Legions must be paid, roads and aqueducts maintained, and distant wars financed. By the 2nd century CE, Rome was stretched thin, guarding borders against Germanic peoples, pushing back Parthian pressure in the east, and tamping down unrest at home. Tax receipts lagged behind military promises. So emperors embraced an old expedient: debasement. Rather than raise taxes, always inflaming discontent, they shaved the silver in the denarius. The numbers tell the story. Under Augustus at the empire's dawn, the denarius carried roughly 95% silver. By Caracalla in the early 3rd century, that share had slipped to about half. Under Gallienus in the mid-3rd century, the coin contained under 5% silver, a bronze wafer flicked with a silver wash. People could see the difference, and they felt it at the market. Inflation followed. Prices rose because money was no longer anchored to real value. What once bought a peck of wheat began buying a pinch. This was no seminar in theory. It wrecked ordinary lives. Soldiers demanded higher stipends just to keep up. Merchants turned away debased coins, preferring barter or settlement in gold. Local trade reverted to direct exchange because the currency was no longer trusted. Each notch of lost confidence drove further debasement, as emperors hoped more coins would substitute for sound coins. It was a vicious loop, the same loop that has dragged many economies into crisis since. The spiral climaxed during the crisis of the 3rd century. Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome endured almost 50 years of chaos. Plagues, border breaches, civil war, and economic breakdown. Emperors rotated through the purple at dizzying speed. Some reigned mere months before a blade ended the experiment. Behind the headline drama lurked a wrecked monetary engine. Taxes were assessed in coins shrinking in worth. Farmers abandoned plots rather than pay impositions in bad money. Trade routes frayed. The government lunged for desperate fixes price ceilings, forced service, tax in kind, none of which restored trust. One ruler, Diocletian, tried to cauterize the wound. In 301 CE, he issued the Edict on maximum prices, listing ceilings for more than 1,000 goods and wages, with violators threatened with death. But price caps cannot fix a broken unit of account. When the money itself is sick, law cannot force it healthy. The black market swelled, official stalls withered. People learned that a statute cannot make a bad coin good. Eventually, Rome quit the denarius. Constantine introduced the solidus around 312 CE, a gold piece of reliable fineness. It steadied the system and endured for centuries in the East. Yet the western half had already been hollowed out. Decades of debasement had gnawed Rome's economic core. Armies grew hard to maintain, networks of trade had snapped, and civic trust had drained away. The fall of Rome was not a single shattering, but a long unspooling, and monetary collapse was one of its sharpest strands. What does this mean for us? That the wrecking of money routinely becomes the wrecking of states. Roman rulers tried to disguise loss by issuing coins that seemed the same while holding less substance. Modern governments are tempted to do the same with paper and digits printing, suppressing rates, or inflating debts into dust. The script repeats: the public bears the cost, savings erode, and trust collapses. History didn't retire after Rome. It keeps teaching. Every major inflationary episode since has traced the same arc. Authorities debase to bridge a fiscal gap. Asset holders shelter in the real, and households without buffers are left exposed. Rome's currency crisis is just the earliest comprehensive case study, a template for breakdown. Jump to the 20th century. After World War I, Germany staggered under reparations. Berlin financed the unpayable by printing marks, a paper echo of Rome's metal trick. By 1923, hyperinflation was a firestorm. A loaf that cost a single mark before the war cost over 200 billion marks by autumn. Workers hauled wages home in wheelbarrows. Pensioners saw decades evaporate. Debts were wiped out. Owners of farms, factories, or foreign currency emerged relatively stronger. Money ceased to mean. The despair fueled extremism and cleared the runway for dictatorship. Zimbabwe replayed the pattern in the 2000s. After seizures of farmland, collapsing output, and mounting obligations, the state leaned on the printing press. By 2008, prices doubled roughly by the day. The annual inflation rate soared to absurd astronomical estimates. Shops could not swap tags fast enough. In the end, Zimbabwe abandoned its own notes and defaulted to foreign currencies. Again, a government tried to cheat reality, and again citizens paid. Nor is this only about extremes. In rich economies, the Roman habit survives. Consider the United States. In 1971, Richard Nixon closed the gold window, severing the last tie between the dollar and a tangible anchor. The dollar became a fiat token backed by confidence in institutions rather than metal. With the anchor gone, the temptation to finance promises grew. Over decades, public and private debt swelled, broad money expanded, and purchasing power ebbed. We have not seen wheelbarrows, but we have seen a steady drift in prices. What $1 bought in 1971 takes many today. The bills look alike. The coins gleam the same. The substance is thinner. The political trick is durable. Sell inflation as growth. Declare that rising nominal wages prove progress even when living costs outrun paychecks. Dress consumption as investment. Point to stock indices as proof of shared wealth, even though ownership is concentrated. Like Rome's emperors, leaders insist nothing fundamental changed while value is quietly drawn from every paycheck and deposit. What makes the risk today unique is its reach. Rome's crisis was imperial, Weimar's was national, Zimbabwe's was local. Today's financial order is planetary. Fiat money's everywhere, towering debts, and central banks ready to create trillions at the first hint of shock. The next convulsion, if it comes, will not stop at a frontier. It will ripple across continents. And as history suggests, those hit hardest will not be insulated elites with hard assets, but the millions whose salaries, pensions, and savings are priced in fragile units. So, what should an individual take from Rome's ordeal? First, understand that inflation is rarely accident. It is policy, the quiet levy that has unstitched regimes for 2 millennia. Second, recognize that durable wealth is not paper promises or digits alone, but assets that hold value when money stumbles: land, resilient skills, productive enterprises, essential resources. Third, never presume stability is permanent. A citizen in the first century would have laughed at the idea that his coin might one day be shunned. A German in 1913 would have scoffed at wheelbarrows. A Zimbabwean in the 1980s expected normalcy. The pattern only looks unlikely until it happens. Rome's unraveling shows that systems slide gradually and then tip suddenly as trust evaporates. When money stops being credible, society frays, contracts fail, trade ceases, armies drift, legitimacy decays. Barbarians at the gate may deliver the final shove, but the mortal wound is struck inside the treasury. Here is the better lesson. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And if you ignore the rhyme, it will crush you all the same. Rome's currency crisis was not only about flawed rulers or greedy cliques. It was about how fragile money becomes when power abuses it. That fragility never disappears. If this shifted your perspective, subscribe. History keeps its receipts, and I'll show you where to read them. Consider the mechanics. Debasement is seigniorage. The mint creates more claims than there are resources, so early spenders win and late receivers lose. As silver fell, good coins vanished into hoards and bad coins filled markets. Gresham's law. To keep real intake, officials raised nominal taxes, bound cultivators to land, and shifted levies to grain and labor. The army lived off requisitions. The annona became heavier than pay. When money fails, institutions improvise. Long credit chains shrink to spot barter. Temples, guilds, and magnates act as brokers. Rents are set in grain, contracts indexed to trusted metal. Each workaround makes sense locally, but breaks markets globally. This is not a plea for metal worship. Any standard fails when politics outruns discipline. What matters is constraint that cannot be gamed for horizons, rules that bite even when budgets hurt. Rome burned that constraint and treated the mint as a cure for fiscal, strategic, and demographic strain. The mint bought time and at compounding cost. Modern echoes aren't identical, but the incentives rhyme. Printing looks painless beside taxation or cuts, so rescues multiply. The sane response is not panic, but preparation. Anchor part of your life where policy cannot quickly hollow it out, in portable skills, productive assets, and local exchange. Judge prosperity by what your earnings command, not by nominal charts. Remember, when choices turn hard, politics lets the currency carry the pain. Healthy money is a public good built on trust, scarcity, and stewardship. When leaders honor that trinity, commerce flowers and citizens plan. When they don't, the bill arrives with interest measured in prices and in damaged institutions. Learn the pattern now. You'll spot it when names and dates change. If you made it this far, drop a plus in the comments to your badge for finishing the deep dive. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more long-form stories where money, history, and power collide. Curious about earlier empires of capital? Check out our others video.